And I'm live. Thanks very much for tuning in. This is the Pandemic Musings, episode 12 now. And the subject is that we are actually terraforming our future reality. And there are three things I'm going to talk about. First of all, I'm going to talk about what, through our experience, we can understand what our lives are really like. Second thing is going to be how, through the influence of a pervasive social media, mainstream media, educational and cultural modern milieu, we are fooled into thinking our lives alike. And how, thirdly, as a result of this, the matrix we create for ourselves, the way we terraform our new lives, our current lives, are shaped for the better or for the worse. Okay. As always, I'm putting this on YouTube as well, so please hit the notification and subscribe button. It will help me create further content. So, what are our lives really like based on the experiences we're having? You know, I'll never forget the day I was standing outside Waitrose, watching a long queue of people holding their mulberry bags, and in the background, you know, their Range Rovers and a couple of Astons and their Audis and Mercedes all parked up, standing in a long, silent queue, about 6 foot apart from each other, and they looked cowed, they looked pathetic, they looked forlorn, they looked enslaved, they looked helpless, and they looked hopeless. Watching these people right here in a suburb of London, at a place like that, and these, by the symbols they sent out, you know, the way they were dressed, the pearl and twin sets and so on, people of a certain age and so on, you could see that these were people who were from the privileged end of society. And they looked as if they had a ball and chain around their legs. That was the day I realized that no, this image they were presenting was so far away from the image that they projected of themselves to the world just a couple of months before that, before we'd gone into lockdown, that I thought to myself, there is something very wrong. And how could human beings plummet so far, so fast? Since then, that would have been April of 2020. Now, a year coming up for 2 years later, I'm able to better connect all the dots and so on. And this is how it seems to me. Take the wheel of a bicycle. Most bicycles have, apparently I just researched that, they mostly have 32 spokes on the wheel. At the outer rim, the spokes are the furthest apart, but all the spokes converge on a central hub. This hub is an important part of the bicycle because it enables the vehicle itself to be driven. It's got very highly engineered ball bearings and so on. It all has to be true. Well, it seems to me that the way life is that the further you are away from the hub, the further apart the spokes are. And that is analogous with the diversity within our communities, by age, by interest, by culture, by ethnicity, by body type, by sexual orientation, by nationality, plus the invisible things like invisible disabilities or visible disabilities. Some of us, you know, have got blood sugar issues. Others have got other genetic illnesses that they're carrying, which you can't see on the surface, but they are definitely there. Hair color, eye color, all the things that make us all diverse. At the point of the wheel, we are the most divergent of all. Now, as you come closer to the center of the wheel, which would be the hub of the wheel, all of these 32 hugely divergent spokes come together at the central hub. Now, you might think to yourself that each one of those spokes, being as far apart as they are at the rim of the wheel, wouldn't have anything to do with each other. So depending on the perspective you have on where you are on that rim, or rather on the wheel, you might think these people haven't got anything in common with each other. But actually, as you follow every single spoke to the center of the wheel, you find that they all end up in unity. Well, it seems to me, my friends, life itself is like that. I present as who I am, of the age that I am, with the background that I have, with the ethnicity that I have, with the body type that I have, the sense of humor that I have, the education that I have, the demographic that I come from, at the rim of the wheel. And yet at the hub of the wheel, I have absolutely something a lot in common with all the 31 other spokes who are hugely different to me at the hub of the wheel. And I like to think of the hub of the wheel as unity, the source, the origin, the fundamental essence of the entirety of this edifice that we're calling a wheel. And so at the center, we all have the same importance. Interestingly enough, if any of the spokes are weak, it affects the integrity of the entire wheel. That's an interesting thing to bear in mind. Now let's look at the second point I was going to look at, which is the impact of the media, our culture, our education, the way reality is presented to us. Reality focuses entirely on the differences at the outside of the wheel. And this focus on the difference is actively meant to make people lose sight of the fact that at the hub of the wheel, we are all completely united. There is literally, you can't put a cigarette paper between one spoke and the other spoke. And everything we do in social media, on the platform that this is on, and so on, actually ramps up those differences and the threats and the risks and the conflicts that we pose to each other. So imagine that. It seems to be the mission of the media to cause the anxiety that conflict always causes. And the characteristics of that situation are many and legion, mostly negative. So here we have it. We have a situation in which life is actually one way, and yet the media, the social media, the platforms that we use, our educational backgrounds and so on, actually impose a different sense of reality to what we're actually living. And so if I compare it to that situation in that queue outside Waitrose, which I will confess, I mean, it was such a turning point. I could feel the tears start to well up in my own eyes as a grown man when I discovered that a terrible lie was being perpetrated before my own eyes. And actually, the hurt derived from the pain of knowing I'd been betrayed by people in whom or institutions in whom I had placed a lot of faith. A bit like discovering that actually your father or your mother aren't really your father or your mother, that you come from somewhere completely different. That is the pain of that kind of betrayal. So now, having formed a reality or been encouraged to view reality in a particular way, all we're doing with it is ideating what our lives should and can be. If you're told you're weak and powerless, you will terraform, create that reality for yourself. If you're told that you're superior to everybody else, you will terraform that reality in your real world. If you're told that you're inferior, you will terraform that reality in your daily life. If you're told that it's because of person A that you can't have what you need, you will hate person A and fight them. If you're told that because of your gender or sexual orientation, you have a certain standard of worth, you will terraform that reality. If you're told that on account of your ethnicity, you don't deserve to be heard, I mention that because it happens a lot to people of African origin, and you don't deserve to be heard, you aren't heard, it'll cause anxiety, pain, resentment, and absolutely the need for you to reverse that situation because it's an unlivable path. If you're told that you are willy-nilly ipso facto superior to everybody else, even if it makes you feel ashamed, guilt, or guilty, you will terraform that reality and lie about it. All of these things are natural consequences. So it seems that the way life itself is requires that we give certain permissions to people for us to be led into the ideas that we are led. I gave the institutions in the society that I have mostly lived in my life, and which I had been raised to trust and respect, institutions like the Ministry of Health, institutions like the Prime Ministership of the United Kingdom, despite a history of rampant colonialism against people who look like me. You've been raised to give them that permission of trust and recognition and respect. So, on account of these permissions, we actually put certain people in power. If you're told that this person is a huge philanthropist and that on account of their actions, people's health is going to be improved, or that on account of their actions, uh, uh, food is going to be more plentiful and cheaper, and so on, you will pedestalize this person, put them kind of up there somewhere, and generally be willing to follow the ideas and suggestions that they seed into your head. If the people who are forming these realities own the media, then what happens? Do you remember the situation, the scenes in Star Wars when the Jedi's go to places where people aren't as spiritually evolved, and a Jedi comes up to an individual and he does the Jedi wave, and he just waves his hand in front of the person he's targeting, and it completely scrambles their brains. and they find completely against their will, involuntarily doing what it is that they're being bidden to do by the Jedi. Well, it's the impact of the media is like the Jedi wave par excellence over our minds. Now, if the media, by its Jedi wave, is leading us to the hub of our wheel, to source, to unity, to our true selves, that's one thing. But if the media is leading us to the rim of our wheel, amping up our differences and our conflicts and the tragedies that are happening every day, our minds themselves become disordered. We are living in a constant state of stress and fear and antipathy, and many of us will have mental illnesses of all kinds. If this is the mindset we hold, what kind of future will we terraform? What kind of individuals will we look up to? Let me share on the screen now an interesting image that came up. This was Matt Hancock. I believe this was yesterday, 4 days after being handed a post by the United Nations as the point man, the lead person on African development post-COVID. Remember, this was the philandering Minister of Health who presided as the Minister of Health during a medical emergency, which a national report was quoted as saying was the worst performance ever in the United Kingdom, who had to resign because he was caught fondling a colleague without social distancing. And this was the man who, as the head of the health services of the United Kingdom, was stopping people saying final farewells to their loved ones in care homes. And there he was fondling one of his own colleagues. Amid allegations also of possible corruption in the way contracts for the COVID response were handed out. And this person was given such a high profile, albeit non-paying role at the United Nations. Well, it took only 4 days for that decision to be reversed. The mealy-mouthed story that was put out by the media was that it turned out that the UN couldn't give him that job because he was a sitting MP in the United Kingdom. Well, excuse me, if the foremost international organization in the world can't do its due diligence and find out whether it is lawful for a sitting UK MP to be given such a high profile role at the United Nations, if they can't do that due diligence, then what are they capable of doing? Do we really believe that they are actually capable of running their Agenda 21? I leave that to your own very good judgment. But the point is this: the outrage, including from me on social media, at the fact that this was also the person who was asked on Sky Television to answer the question of diversity in his own cabinet. He was asked if there were any black ministers. He couldn't answer. And the answer was a round figure. It was zero, none, nada, not one. He couldn't answer this question. And this was the person who was being presented as the front man for pulling Africa out of the mire post COVID-19. Well, there you are. It was the ideation of people's outrage that caused a change in that position within 4 days. And so I'll close this post by saying this very simply, that we terraform the reality that is in front of us. We can give away all our liberties and all our freedoms by being silent, focusing on our anxiety, our fear, our sense of inferiority, our sense of lack of power, to give absolutely everything away. And having given that permission, we will form that reality for ourselves. It is up to us whether we imprison ourselves or not. Nobody can imprison us. It is up to us whether we walk into slavery or not. Nobody can enslave us. And so I'll leave you with this thought. We must be very careful of a media that leads us away from the hub of our lives to the outer hinterlands of our lives, in which we wind up fighting each other and doing each other down, so that we can be predated on by those who have very little respect for humanity. Thanks very much for watching, and it's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.